Thanks, Jaya. Welcome, everybody. I am Aaron Quinn. I'm the Director of Athletics. Special welcome to our guest panelists tonight. You'll hear more about them in a few minutes. My role tonight is to introduce our moderator, Alex Wolff. But first, I'd like to thank the members of the team who are present here tonight from the Center for Social Entrepreneurship, which is sponsoring tonight's event. Would Jaya, Liz, who you just met, Liz Robinson, Heather Neuwirth, and Lauren Kelly please stand to be recognized? Thanks. Quick PSA here. If you're not familiar with the Center for Social Entrepreneurship, it's just short of a year old now. And if you were here last year, you may remember the spectacular launch with keynote addresses from Jacqueline Novogratz and Bill Drayton. The center is currently located at 118 South Main Street. There are a few things you should know about the center. For students, there are grant and fellowship opportunities. So if you have ideas or questions, please connect with the center. There will be another big symposium this January, like last year's symposium. Details are to be announced, but if you happen to be taking any notes or want to make a mental note, Majora Carter and Billy Parrish are the two keynote speakers this year, so really great for us at Middlebury to have them coming. And then finally, the center sponsors a Friday lecture series in Axon 219 from 12:30 to 1:30. The lectures are open to everybody. You don't have to. It's not cumulative. You don't have to go every week. You can just show up out of the blue any given Friday. So for students, go/CSE, so you can check out stuff about the center. And I believe the first thing that pops up is the Friday lecture series. So you can click on that, check through lectures, put it in your calendar, and just show up. It's great space down there. I'd encourage you just to go pop in, visit 118 South Main, and get involved. I think it's a great opportunity to really enrich your college experience here. Now it gives me great pleasure to welcome and introduce our moderator, Alex Wolff. I have to say I'm not particularly fond of introductions that are really long on degrees earned, publications, and accomplishments. Just suffice to say that Alex's list would be sufficiently long and impressive. I know from experience that Alex agrees with me on this. So it is important, though, to give you some context for who Alex is in case you don't know him. So bear with me through a few of these. Alex has been on the staff of Sports Illustrated since 1980, and he's been a senior writer at SI since 1985. He currently serves as the longest tenured writer at Sports Illustrated. He has covered numerous sports and events, including basketball, the Olympics, including this past summer in London, and the World Cup. He's written feature articles on topics as broad-ranging as race, gender, drugs, education, law, business, and sustainability, all with the intersection of sport and society at the core. He has been the author or co-author of 6 books, including one of my favorite sports books, Big Game, Small World, A Basketball Adventure, which is an account of a year spent traveling the globe and engaging the game of basketball and its impact globally. I can go on, and trust me, my preceding comments do not do justice to Alex's professional career, but to understand why Alex is the moderator, you could safely assume he was invited because of his career generally, or specifically his feature article in Sports Illustrated entitled "Sports Saves the World." This would be accurate, but not entirely complete. To know the full story about why Alex was invited is to learn what is really important about Alex. It is to know about his humility and his community orientation. I will tell you 2 quick stories to illustrate this point. When a group of Middlebury College employees first met to discuss the possibility of a Center for Social Entrepreneurship on the Middlebury campus, the small group in that meeting included Alex. Yes, part of it was the knowledge that Alex was working on a Sport for Development and Peace article for Sports Illustrated, and his expertise would really help. And that's not insignificant, but it was also because Alex is such a great collaborator. He was the person in the community who we felt could bring a local community perspective to the project with a global view as well. And his thoughtfulness and insights would be invaluable. All of this proved to be true, so it's only appropriate that Alex, who was in on that first brainstorming meeting, is here with us tonight. The other story I'll share very quickly is related to a pickup 3-on-3 game, which Alex and I play several times a week together. And it happened just recently. We were playing with a couple of Middlebury College dads visiting their daughters who are athletes here, a few coaches, Alex and myself. The dads clearly enjoyed basketball, and Alex was his usual self in pickup hoops. hitting every open pass and shooting around 80–90% from 12 to 15 feet on open jump shots. When the game ended, the dads asked Alex if he was one of the coaches. I think at first they were just like, I don't know who this guy is, but he was hitting all these shots. They said, "You were one of the coaches?" And Alex replied, "No, I'm a Cornwall resident." Alex is, of course, much more than simply a Cornwall resident. And in the context of basketball, he is a lot more than just a simple Cornwall resident. Right? We're the lucky benefactors of Cornwall resident being a major part of Alex's resume. So now we're going to first watch an introductory video that'll tell you about our panelists tonight and our subject. But before we do, please join me in welcoming Cornwall resident Alex Wolff.
When he graduated from Dartmouth in the early 90s, Tommy Clark was like many other college athletes. He wasn't quite ready to give up the game he loved, so he kited off to play pro soccer in Zimbabwe for Highlanders FC in Bulawayo, the club his Scottish father had coached when Tommy was a kid. But what he found there left him mystified and heartbroken. 7 of his dad's finest players, seemingly invincible footballers whom Tommy had idolized, were dead or dying. Worst of all, no one dared say why. During his year in Zimbabwe, not once did Clark have a conversation about AIDS or the HIV virus. Back in the States, after med school and while doing a residency in pediatrics, Clark fully realized the power of the game he had played most of his life. In 2002, he and 3 ex-Highlanders launched grassroots soccer to break down that wall of silence and educate about HIV. Using the secret sauce of soccer, grassroots soccer broaches difficult subjects with humor and fun, and most important, to lasting effect. The demonstrated success of grassroots soccer has helped drive a decline in infection rates across a dozen African countries. Today, everywhere, sport is being deployed as a tool to do nothing less than help repair the world. In the Eastlands of Nairobi, the Mutothori Youth Sports Association awards points in the standings not just for achievements on the soccer field, but for cleaning that field up. In Venezuela, the founder of Project Alcatraz realized that drug gangs crave discipline and a family atmosphere as much as they thrill to violence. So he conscripts gangs as intact teams into his rugby league, offering players life skills training, apprenticeships, and, if they can stay clean, jobs. In post-conflict Cambodia, a hugely successful volleyball league not only provides recreation to the disabled, but with sponsorship and exposure has so transformed public attitudes that many of the 40,000 amputees in that country now wear shorts to proudly show off their prostheses. In cities around the U.S. where public funding for schools and social services is drying up, sports teams, programs, and clubs are rushing into the breach, delivering whole curricula to school districts in need, leading enrichment and after-school programs, and even setting up charter schools. The movement is called Sport for Development and Peace, or SDP, and smart practitioners on the ground have figured out how to make their efforts self-sustaining. In Germany, Box Girls, a women's boxing program in Turkish immigrant neighborhoods, sells gym memberships to the public, runs a cafe on the premises, and hires out motivational speakers to women's groups. In Mozambique, FC Manica, a soccer club, buys computers for life skills programs with proceeds from harvesting fruit from trees that have been planted around its pitches. At every inflection point in South Africa's journey to a functioning, multiracial democracy, sport has been there, whether in the international sports boycott that helped banish apartheid, or in the soccer league that imprisoned inmates on Robben Island ran among themselves, and in which they learned the obligations and workings of self-government, or in the unity that President Nelson Mandela and National Rugby captain Francois Pienaar forged around the Springboks' victory in the 1995 World Cup. The spirit of that ethic has reached Middlebury. The Panther Athletic Department has its own environmental sustainability coordinator. Half the student body engages in some sort of volunteerism or public service, and virtually all varsity athletes do. Undergraduates and young alumni alike have become players in this burgeoning movement, sparking the spirits of others as they've had their own idealism kindled. Tonight we'll meet 4 of them and learn how each is working to harness the power of sport.
I am Al Boillot, and I graduated from Middlebury in 2012 with a major in history and a minor in education studies. Throughout my time at Middlebury, my 2 biggest passions were always squash, which I played here for 4 years, and working with underserved children. In the winter of my senior year, when I heard of an opportunity to combine those 2 passions in a job, I thought it was too good to be true. That opportunity came from a small nonprofit organization based in the Bronx called City Squash. City Squash pairs squash and academics to completely change the course of our students' lives. While their classmates are unoccupied in the after-school hours, the hours with the most potential for danger in communities like the Bronx, we are providing our students with academic enrichment, squash instruction, and personal friendship and support. At City Squash, we are opening the sport of squash to all cultures and races while helping our students gain access to top-tier academic institutions. Since our founding in 2002, we have placed 43 students in independent day and boarding schools and 28 students at colleges where they play squash. Whether it is the high school senior who will be the first person in his entire family to attend college, the 6th grader who asks me if she can start SSAT tutoring a year early to increase her chances of getting into an independent high school, or the student whose face lights up when he hears that a high school he is looking at has a 100% graduation and college attendance rate, our students inspire me every day. It is these stories that make me fully believe in the power of sport to change the lives of individuals, because at the end of the day, it is squash that draws students to City Squash, and their love of the game that keeps them motivated and engaged in our program.
I'm Dave Campbell, and I graduated from Middlebury in 2009, majoring in economics and captaining the lacrosse team. In January of my senior year, I joined Lacrosse Nation's founders Brett Hughes and Brad Corrigan on their organization's pilot trip. Upon arrival in Managua, Nicaragua, I found myself in the middle of La Treca, a trash dump community, surrounded by filth, disease, and despair. The inhospitable place made me ache with confusion, sadness, and at times anger. Then, led by dozens of children, we found our way to a field. The place transformed. With lacrosse sticks in hand, we ran, we laughed, and we played. And for those moments, we were all completely present. In doing so, I saw the beauty of the human spirit, the strength of the human will, and the internal source of human happiness. When we left La Treca, our hearts and minds stayed. I joined the board of directors, and together we worked to build programs to help both present and future needs by offering a PE lacrosse program backed by a life skills curriculum, a feeding program, and educational support. We have grown the program to include another community in Nicaragua, 1 in Costa Rica, and 2 in the United States. It has been a joy to see the sport that has helped guide me through life and has helped strengthen the lives of others. My involvement with Lacrosse Nations led me to the development of GivingSomeThing.com. Along with Mike Stone, we've created an online platform similar to a wedding registry where donors can send real goods to nonprofits. As a result, Giving Something helps nonprofits and donors connect in a more tangible and transparent way. This summer, as part of our outreach, Mike and I embarked on a 7-week volunteering road trip to lend a helping hand and to learn more about the nonprofits that we seek to serve. Giving Something is now working with nearly 200 nonprofits, with new partners joining every day. Through my work with Lacrosse Nations and Giving Something, I've learned about the incredible need in both our country and the world. It is our responsibility to make the most of our gifts, our capabilities, and our capacity to help others. Be it our own community, a community we're visiting, or a place that we'll never go, we can all make a difference because giving does not need to be an act of greatness, rather an act of gratitude.
My name is Kelly Brush Davisson. I graduated from Middlebury in 2008 with a major in film and media culture. As a sophomore on the alpine ski team, I sustained a spinal cord injury at the Williams Carnival after I fell and hit a lift tower. I didn't return to Middlebury that spring while I underwent 3 months of rehabilitation. While in rehab, I began to learn my limitations but also my possibilities. I could still ski, bike, and play tennis, among other things. But adaptive equipment comes at a high price. So when I returned the following fall to Middlebury, the ski team decided to organize a 100-mile bike ride to raise money to buy me a monoski and a hand cycle. They needed to raise $10,000 for these 2 pieces of equipment. They raised $65,000. Inspired by the ski team's efforts, and the people I met in rehab, we started the Kelly Brush Foundation for the dual purpose of improving ski racing safety and providing adaptive sporting equipment grants for people who can't afford it. Every fall since, we've run the Kelly Brush Foundation Century Ride. We've raised over $1 million in the past 6 years. I was lucky enough to have the ski team buy me the hand cycle and monoskis, but the prohibitive cost of adaptive sporting equipment prevents a lot of people with spinal cord injuries from enjoying the sports and activities all of us here take for granted. Through the foundation, we're trying to make the sport that has given me so much safer and get people with these debilitating injuries outside and enjoying activities they may have thought were no longer possible.
My name is Kennedy Mutothori Mugo. I am from Nairobi, Kenya, and my life is a living example of what athletics and sports can do for humanity. Just after high school, I was able to share in a friend's dream and co-found a high school in Huruma slums in Nairobi, Kenya. My best friend's mom had a dream, but she had no one to dream with. I shared this dream with her and a few of my rugby friends, and we all dreamed together and made the school a reality. New Dawn High School was born. The spirit of sports enabled us not to just think of ourselves, but to think of our community at large. As a senior last year, this spirit came back to me again, and the idea that sports could be used to bring a community from Kenya and one from Middlebury together was initiated. I was able to dream with my best friends who were in my class together with others in the lower classes, and they all belonged to different sports teams, from rugby to soccer to hockey to lacrosse, and some who did not even belong to sports teams. Together, this team of 12 students, we were able to come up with a plan and fundraise $25,000 and ended up going to Kenya last summer and worked with a New Dawn community to build a library for the students there. With sports, we were able to do this, and I believe the world could be more empathetic and create a more diverse community of a loving humanity if we all believed sports could do this.
Thank you so much. Aaron, thank you for the introduction. Someday I'll get back at you for that. This is indeed a wonderful weekend, and not just because for the first time in 20 years, Middlebury is going into a homecoming weekend with a football team that's 4-0. And I believe in 1972, when Kelly's father was a coach here, they were 5-0 maybe going in, I think.
Undefeated, at least.
At least, she says. Okay. But I think the great thing about this weekend is that we've been able to assemble 4 really extraordinary people here for you, and 3 of them recent alums, and 1 who, in Mugo, who's a Feb, about to graduate, but has probably done almost as much as any alum could imagine doing. So it's really terrific. But I'm glad we took those 14-plus minutes to introduce you to this movement, so you really have a sense of the context in which Middlebury mid-kids are doing things and mid-alums are doing things. It's a global context. And one of the things that was mentioned there briefly about the rugby project in Venezuela, to me was so interesting. The founder of that project, Project Alcatraz, where they took the drug gangs and conscripted them whole into these rugby leagues because they felt this family atmosphere in their gang, and they thrilled to violence in their gang, and rugby actually offers family atmosphere and violence, right, Mugo, in a certain controlled and respectable way. But I found this again and again as I looked at this movement, that the genius of it is the way particular sports are matched with particular problems sometimes. And rugby's a great example in terms of bringing gangs to heel. And one of the other great examples that I ran into was the Box Girls program that we saw mentioned there. In the Turkish, very conservative Turkish immigrant neighborhoods in Germany, the woman who founded it told me that, strangely enough, soccer was not considered appropriate for their daughters. The fathers didn't like that because it was considered a man's sport, and swimming was considered too immodest. But they really liked boxing because it was self-defense, and they liked the idea that their daughters could defend themselves and thereby defend their honor. So what I'd love to just get us started, I wanted to ask Dave. There was a picture in there of a kid holding a lacrosse stick in Managua. And I just wonder if there's something about lacrosse that you found is kind of magical when you put a stick in a kid's hand, be it in Costa Rica or Nicaragua or even in parts of the U.S. Is there something about that sport that makes it really well adapted to what you're trying to do?
Yeah, I think it is. I think the sport lacrosse, for the kids that we're introducing it to, it's unique in that they've had no exposure to it. So it's a brand new sport. There's no standard, no rules, they've never seen an older brother or another family member play. I think the fact that there's a tool involved, and it was actually really interesting on that first trip to Managua, the people who work in the trash dump to pick through trash and look for recyclables and look for things that they can sell and gain value from, actually use a similar tool. It's a long stick with a hook on the end that they can pick through the trash with. And it was bizarrely analogous when we were teaching these kids how to, we open the bag of sticks and they go and grab them, and they're just naturally grabbing it with their 2 hands in the right position and had this control over the stick. And I think the final part that's really special about lacrosse is that the learning, it's kind of objective or binary in the sense that, when you're teaching a child how to play and you throw them a ball and they miss it, they know they've missed it, and you throw it again and they miss it, and then you finally throw it and they catch it, their eyes light up and they know they've had success, and you can applaud them and you can congratulate them, and they want to have that happen again. And so I think for those parts of the sport are really special. And then I think, as you talked about with Mugo and having an outlet for the physicality, often there's scuffles, there's people pushing each other or kind of finding an outlet for physicality, and here we're giving them a safe place with coaches who are kind of creating barriers around what's okay and what's not, and that's we found that to really, they are learning to respect each other and learn to know their limits, but also know what is appropriate.
One of the things about lacrosse that I think lends it its magic, well, there are a number of things. The sport, as you know, has really boomed in the States, and part of it is that kids don't feel that it's imposed by by parents, so much by adults, because it is sort of new and different, almost like an extreme sport like skateboarding, except as a team sport. But there's also that sense of the Native American origins and the myths and so forth. Through Lacrosse the Nations, do you spend time actually sharing the origins of the game and the Iroquois and all that? And does it connect with kids?
Yeah, I mean, it is an amazing history, and that you talk about the gang teams that play rugby. You know, the Gadaway was an Indian game it means little brother of war, and it was used amongst Native Americans to settle minor disputes. And rather than going to war and having all of that cost in the lives and all of that commitment, they could play this game that would be violent at times or have injuries, but it would settle disputes. And you know, I think that does connect with them, and we try to share that history. We also try to share the modern game and say, you know, we're playing this different kind of sport in the schoolyard or in the field that, you know, there's not as much equipment and it's not as like formal in terms of the whistles and the timing and all that. But we'll show them, you know, videos and clips of the game at full speed, you know, the way it's played in the States or in other parts of the world, and they get excited to know that they're at the beginning stages of something that's really neat.
Neat. You know, another thing that got mentioned in the video, as you went through, you may have caught it, was about how public schools in the States, particularly in urban areas, are under such incredible budget pressures now that after-school programs, interscholastic sports, so many things are getting dropped. And from talking to Al a little bit about City Squash, I get the sense that her organization works really closely with school counselors. You're almost kind of shoulder to shoulder in the educational mission. And I'd love to hear a little bit about what it is that you do and your program does in terms of kind of, you know, running into that breach where it's really needed.
Well, I think that a huge thing for us is that, like, for, say, the middle school that we partner with, there are 932 students in that middle school, and it's just for 6th, 7th, and 8th grades. So any extra class time, extra tutoring that you can give them is huge, because the school is vastly understaffed for that number of students, and they also don't have the resources. So where we can, we try and put in the extra academic support, the extra academic tutoring, whatever it is, to help bring them up. And so, you know, a huge thing also is just giving them the opportunity to kind of stand out in that school, because in the large public schools, you'll hear a lot about those students at the top and at the bottom standing out and getting attention, but the ones in the middle are completely lost. And City Squash makes it so that none of our students get lost, because we're there to see how they're doing. We see their grades, we talk to their teachers, and we see how they're doing in our own classrooms. And it's also a nice way for them to feel distinguished at their own school. I mean, when they walk into middle school 45 with a squash bag on their shoulders, that's setting them apart from everyone else at that school, because no one else is walking in with a squash bag unless they're part of City Squash. But at the same time, everyone in the school knows what City Squash is and really respects the program and thinks that it's a great opportunity. And so it's just a great thing for our kids to have.
And obviously, without mentioning any names or betraying any confidences, I mean, there are instances where you've noticed something with a participant in the program that you felt you wanted to bring to the attention of a teacher or counselor in a school, or vice versa. You're really working hand in glove with that.
Yeah, definitely. I would say even more so the teachers bringing it to us. At the beginning of the year, our different directors for academics in the lower, middle, and high school will send out an email to all of the teachers that are working with our students, just introducing themselves, saying, let us know if anything comes up during the year. And we actually get a lot of emails from the teachers with both good and bad reports. And I've actually, you know, I'm director of placement, so I don't specifically do those emails, but I still get emails from the teachers saying, you know, this student had a problem yesterday. What can you guys do to help in the disciplinary process? Because they're really looking for help there at the middle school, because, I mean, they don't have the resources to focus on every single student who might have a disciplinary problem throughout the day. And so for them, it's very helpful to say to us, you know, can you help us with this problem? Is there something going on at home? What can you tell us about this student?
You know, as I researched this whole field, the thing that just kept impressing me again and again was how many remarkable programs began with one person who had a kind of aha moment, the way at the very beginning of the multimedia presentation, Tommy Clark, who by the way is the brother of Jen Clark, Middlebury's assistant women's soccer coach. Most of you probably know that. He had that really powerful moment of realization that there was a problem and then that there was this potential solution. It seemed to have taken him going off to med school for it to happen. But I'd love to hear from Kelly about when it was that you realized that there was something that you could create, really, that would address what you observed from your very unique perspective.
Yeah, for me, I did sort of have this aha moment, and it obviously came from my injury. And I was in rehab for 3 months after I got hurt, and before the end of that rehab process, the Callie Brush Foundation had already been born, and we had our 2 main goals already in place. The first goal about ski racing safety really came because I had this injury, and I'm in rehab, and I was going through all this. But at the same time, there's my boyfriend and my sister and all my teammates, my best friends, are going out and going skiing, and they're still ski racing, and they're doing all this stuff. And I was sitting there thinking, this is crazy. How can I sit here having my injury and have all of these people go out and still be part of this sport and not have me do something about it, to try to keep it safe, try to make some good come out of my injury in that way. So that's how that sort of became part of the foundation's mission to begin with. I really wanted to protect my friends, you know, it was maybe sort of selfish that way, but, and protect, you know, the sport in general. And then the adaptive equipment, providing grants for adaptive equipment was another one that came while I was in rehab, because for me, being an athlete was so part of my identity before I got hurt, and I thought that that was taken away from me after I had my injury. And, you know, there goes skiing, there goes biking, there goes everything that I like to do. And I realized when I was in rehab, I was sort of taught about all these things that I could still do, and they brought me out biking, and they brought in a monoski and showed us what we could do. And it was sort of, you know, I was sort of reborn in that and realized that I could still do all of these things. But at the same time, a hand cycle is minimum $2,000, and not a lot of people have that money just lying around to spend, especially people who've had this injury, because it's an expensive injury in itself. So I realized that this would be such an amazing thing to have this piece of equipment, but how awful to really want it and not be able to get it. So, you know, these sort of 2 main goals seemed really evident to me right away. And then the struggle for me was, okay, now I have these 2 ideas, these 2 things that I want to do. How do we figure out, how do we raise money? How do we do something with these? And that was actually really fun to figure out.
And then in the multimedia, we got to see $65,000 came in with that first ride. Mm-hmm. And was that after you decided to start the foundation?
Yeah, so what ended up happening was we had decided to start the foundation while I was in rehab, and we were going through the whole process of, you know, becoming certified a 501c3 organization, doing all that, and all the while this bike ride was being organized. And as I said in that presentation, it was originally planned to raise money for me. The ski team wanted to raise the money because it's so expensive to buy me a monoski so I could go out and ski with them still and to do all that. So we're doing this whole thing and doing this bike ride, and at the same time doing this thing with the foundation. And then after we realized how successful the first bike ride was, we were like, well, this makes a lot of sense to just keep doing this bike ride every year and apply to the foundation after that.
And now more than $1 million has been raised. It's extraordinary.
Yeah.
Wow. Mugo, one of the things that is part of the learning curve for so many development projects that originate in the developed world that want to benefit the developing world, it's the issue of, well, are these people parachuting in with their programming and their good intentions? Are they really welcome? Do they really know us? Do they listen to what it is that we need? Do they have a way to kind of hand the program off to the country, be it in Africa or South America or Asia, wherever it might be, so it can be formed and its destiny can be determined by the people who are supposed to benefit from it? And I'd love to hear you talk about, as a Kenyan, what your perspective is on that. And even when you did the New Dawn project, you found yourself, as I understand it, you had to put yourself in the position of a listener, even though you're Kenyan, to make sure that this school and library project was really meeting the needs of the community.
I did become a listener, and I'll be honest that I've not always been a great listener, and it's something that I'm still working on even today. But you're right. One of the first things I realized was listening is key, and hearing exactly what people have to say is key, especially when it comes to developing projects or projects that are trying to help. Because I do remember this: the road to hell is paved with good intentions, and that actually has come true with it came true a bit with our project, in the sense that we hadn't talked as much as we thought we had with people on the ground, and we went to Kenya with actually a bunch of them are back there. We have Helen, Michaela, and Caroline, and we had fundraised throughout the whole year at Middlebury, and we were ready to go and build a library for this high school. And when we got there, we first of all didn't talk to anyone. We went to the site on a Sunday when no one was there, and we viewed the place, and we were like, hey, so we need to get primer, we need to buy paint brushes, we need to, because the place was it was still very incomplete. And so I did have, at the back of my mind, I thought, actually we know we're here to build a library, but we do need to communicate with the people before we purchase everything. But everyone was so eager. We'd taken all these flights from all around, from the US going to Kenya, and I guess we didn't listen too well. We're a bit elitist in that sense, because we thought we're bringing answers to these people and we're coming to fix their lives. And so that Monday morning we got there, and we found people with paint brushes, with tubs of paint. So there are already people from the community who are working on part of the project, because as we had decided. And so we looked a bit silly on our end, a bunch of Middlebury Americans with and of course a Kenyan who, even within Kenya, I guess, the Kenyan elites. And so I definitely did come across as a Kenyan elite who didn't talk and who didn't communicate. But we're very quick to fix that, and we talked to them. We handed them our small amounts of paints, and we cracked around, and we're like, we thought we'd be painting today, but of course, you're the experts. And that was to say, we learned that, I remember we talked to the people there, we learned that people in New Dawn have an idea of how they want their school to look. They have answers to most of their problems, and we were in the capacity of helping to finance their library, which is finances they didn't have, but they had a lot of the other answers, and they know exactly what they want their community to look like. And this actually led to us doing interviews with the community later on, and if I might be talking about this later, we went into the community with Marty. Marty's not here today, he graduated, and we did interviews with the people who live in the residents of Huruma slum, and it was just it was great to listen to people and to hear exactly what they think of us, and to bring that community together, in the sense that we're outsiders and we're coming into this community from a power hierarchy. We had to accept that we were the ones who are coming into a community to make it, and we're the ones who visited the place, and it's not the other way around. It wasn't the Kenyans coming to the U.S. to make a library for someone. So we had to actually be like, hey, we understand that we're coming from a power hierarchy and we're at the top of the hegemony, but it doesn't mean that you're powerless. Because at times, in the process of trying to help, you can create powerlessness and leave the people there in a worse situation than they were in. And so these are tough questions that might sound more theoretical than practical. And so we had to think about them as a team. And it's great we were a team when we were thinking about this.
You know, that whole idea of matching what donors want to give with what a nonprofit needs or a community needs is really essentially what GivingSomeThing is all about. It's about matchmaking and finding that. And I assume that part of your inspiration for GivingSomeThing came from your work with Lacrosse the Nations as a nonprofit and saying people don't really know what we need, or we know what we need, and you and Mike took this voluntour where you were basically listening, essentially what Mugo was talking about, where you went around the country. And what were some of your takeaways from that tour in terms of nonprofits out there, particularly those with a sports focus, and kind of where this movement is domestically in the States? I mean, you must have visited a number of sports-related nonprofits in your travels.
Yeah, and you know, that's exactly it. Like the idea for GivingSomeThing did come out of Lacrosse Nations. It actually was born from a board meeting that we were having and talking about our needs and what people, you know, what we need as an organization and what our donors were asking, because people can really give in three major ways. You know, they can give money to an organization, they can give time, and they can give goods. And we were realizing that people were asking what goods we needed, and we didn't have a great way to receive them and communicate that. So, you know, and then as we went on the Bon tour and we got to see, you know, every corner of the country and dozens of nonprofits and spend entire days working with them, including a bunch of sports programs or after-school sports programs, like the Boys and Girls Club, KIP DC, which has a soccer program. There's a group in Los Angeles called OLA that it's like a Boys and Girls Club on steroids, as academic programs, music programs, sports programs, everything. Excuse me. And you know, I think what it revealed to us is that every community has needs, whether it's right here in Middlebury or Addison County, Vermont, New England. You know, as you zoom out or as you zoom in, every place has needs. And on the flip side of that, every community has people who are addressing those, and people are saying, feeling ownership of that and wanting to help. And it was, you know, by being on the ground and really traveling and spending quality time with a handful of organizations in each place, we really got an exposure to kind of the inner workings of those communities, and really seeing the faces that otherwise for us are emails and phone calls and voices. And as far as the movement of utilizing sport, you know, we're working with a group called Up to Us, which we're starting to develop a plan where we can. They're an umbrella organization that helps train athletic programs, youth athletic programs all over the country. They work with over 600 groups, providing curriculum, providing trainings, providing materials, guidance, finances, and we're working with them to help extend GivingSomeThing to all of their chapters. So right now, where I would say 15% of our nonprofit partners are athletically related, this is a group that's really saying, we like what you have, because these programs need soccer balls, they need cones, they need whistles, they need digital cameras to document and share this stuff on social media. The very things that Lacrosse the Nations was feeling. And so for us to see a group like this that's working with Coach Across America, which is like a AmeriCorps program for placing coaches, and to be able to partner with them to really, in a kind of a big step forward, work with all of their members. It's a really exciting thing for us, you know, and just knowing that those members are discovering the same things that we are, that we're talking about, that athletics can create change in the community, and it can change lives, it can reorient, and it also can speak to kids that might not hear other influences. they can learn things on the playing field that they might not learn in a classroom.
Up to us and Coach Across America is it's exactly like Teach for America. Came to my attention when I was working on the story. They're doing incredible things, and actually, as part of that, going into the breach there, where if the districts can't afford to pay coaches, where so many now have to cut out budget allocations for interscholastic sports, it's exactly the program. There may be some people in this room who might be intrigued by it. Another fascinating outfit that came to my attention when I was working on the package for Sports Illustrated about this movement was an outfit called Global Bike. And I was particularly interested in programs that could be easily scaled up, that easily replicable, and if it was working here, there's no reason it couldn't work there, and if it just got the funding and the resources and the personnel, who knows how far it could go. What Global Bike did is it was pledged to bringing really rugged utility bicycles to the developing world. So people who needed, let's say you're a water engineer and you need to get to a remote village to test on water quality, put in a new well, you could get there, you could bring your equipment in a much more efficient way than otherwise. And this could be done all sorts of places. And the way Global Bike did it is they had in the States a bike racing team called Team Global Bike that would compete and was kind of the marketing piece of it all. They would compete, raise the profile of what they were doing, and help them solicit money, which would then go to the purchase of the bikes. But they had purchased something like several thousand bicycles and placed them with aid workers, so they were doing good. But you begin to think, wow, what if they could do 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 times as many bikes, get them in the hands of people? How effective would that be? So it's an example of scaling up, and I'm curious about city-based squash programs around the country. I mean, how many are there? How many could there be? And how do you go about taking a program like that and expanding it?
So City Squash is actually one of 13 similar programs throughout the country. And we're all part of an umbrella organization called NUSIA, National Urban Squash and Education Association. So City Squash, we were the fourth to be created in 2002. So obviously in the last several years, there have been a ton that have started. And these are in, all the major cities, New York, Boston, Chicago, DC, Baltimore, but they're also starting to spread so that now we have one in San Diego. And actually, the squash club where they play in San Diego, it's the only squash club in San Diego. So we really are expanding the sport that, is typically a very Northeast sport. And what really needs to happen for us to expand is we have to have access to courts. So a great way to do that is to kind of find these communities in urban places where there's a real need, but there's a community next door that does not have that need. Or like what we do at City Squash, Fordham University, we use their squash courts. But so an interesting model right now is in Lawrence, Massachusetts. They're in the middle of starting a program there. Lawrence is, I believe I heard the other day, one of the poorest towns in Massachusetts. But it's right next to Andover and North Andover, which are home to Phillips Andover Academy and the Brooks School. So Brooks and Andover have been playing a huge role in getting this urban squash program off the ground in Lawrence. And it's actually a great thing for the teams there. I was just talking to the Brooks coach the other day, and he was saying that, not only is he doing it for the kids in Lawrence, but he's doing it for his kids so that they can see what it's like for these kids, but also for these kids to then realize that they're the same and they can play squash together and really connect on that level.
Kelly, when you came back to Middlebury, I guess it was it the summer of '07 that you got back on campus to finish up your degree requirements? Is that?
No, I got hurt the winter of 2006 and came back the next fall, so the fall of 2006. Yeah.
Okay. And did you then, how did you rejoin the team, as it were? I mean, and what was that like?
That was actually, it was really easy for me. the ski team, so many of the people on the ski team were my best friends, and they really rallied around me so much right after I got hurt. And a bunch of them came and visited me out when I was in rehab, and I saw a bunch of them there and then over the summer. And so then coming back to Middlebury, it was a really interesting experience to come back in general, because it was Middlebury, which I had known. It had been my school for a year and a half, I guess, at that point, or almost 2 years. But it was really different to me because I was in a chair and there were a bunch of obstacles and things that you didn't realize before, but all of a sudden you can't get into half the buildings that you have classes in, and stuff like that really make it sort of a different type of school. But at the same time, you were coming back and it was still Middlebury. I mean, Middlebury was still Middlebury, and everybody was so supportive of me, and that sort of started with the ski team. I think it was the first weekend of school, so we'd had a week of school, and then the next weekend was when we had the bike ride that raised money for me, and it was the ski team. Everybody rode, and then we had a big barbecue after, and it sort of was it was really great because it made me feel like I was still part of the team, even though I wasn't going to be racing for them anymore. And that sort of continued. So for the next 2 years, my junior and senior year, I was on the ski team. I mean, I think I was even on the roster, and everybody knew I was never going to ski for them, but I was still part of the team. I got a uniform every year, and which made it so great for me. I got to still be part of my sports team, even though I wasn't really technically ever going to ski for Middlebury. But it made my Middlebury experience really great to have that.
Would you have your mono ski up at practice and be right there with riding the bus up to the bowl and everything?
Yeah, I mean, everything was a little bit different, and the first year I was just learning how to ski in a mono ski, so I was really bad, and that was a challenge in itself. But yeah, I mean, I was going up, especially during J term when we had a lot more time. I would go up a couple of times a week if I could and ski with them. I mean, they were skiing every day, which I couldn't do, but it was. Yeah, I was right there with them every single carnival I went to. I think there's 6 carnivals every season, and I went to every single one of them, both my junior and senior year. So that was a lot of fun, being able to be there, be part of the team, and have that while I was here.
If you ever wonder how it is that you can gain any team benefits from what's really an individual sport, you've pretty much encapsulated it right here for us, I'd say. And also, Kelly, I think you've touched on something that maybe Mugo could address, which is frustrations and obstacles in sport, how sport prepares us to meet them and overcome them. And in your own way, I mean, I know you've talked really eloquently about how sport gave you the confidence to even try to start New Dawn with your friend's mother and everybody in the community, but also just when you were running up against frustrations. Where are you drawing on some of your lessons learned as an athlete to help you push through?
I definitely was drawing on from lessons gotten from sports. So from those who've seen the sports of rugby, and plus most other sports, I'd agree, it's resilience is the mark of a champion. You have to keep bouncing back. And when you're losing, you have to keep coming in, and that's been, I feel, the journey with New Dawn from the beginning. I remember in 2006 when I taught at New Dawn for 2 years after high school, and having to wake up early in the morning. Some days you have to wake up at 4 a.m. so you can catch that matatu, so you can be in school at like 6:30. That was really tough. And also not having facilities in class. At that time, we had just one structure, and it was a structure donated by the pastor, Pastor Sam, and it doubled as a church and a school at the same time. And so we had benches, but no desks, so these students didn't have places to write on. And it was good that at that time, I also had my friend Alu, who played rugby with me. And so we sort of looked at it as, hey, it's like a game, we have to keep bouncing back. And so we brought that mentality to the school when we're doing things. this summer too, there were some obstacles that I felt sports definitely is what made me bounce back from them. A great example would be when we were doing the interviews. So Marty and I were doing interviews every single day with people who live in there, and we discovered that they actually don't view the school as favorably as we thought, which was a surprise to us. Talking about the listenings, and people in the community feel like the school has been getting money by showcasing their poverty, which was the last thing we expected to hear from the people who lived in there. And so they felt that the school has been getting money showcasing their poverty, and they were not happy with the way the director of the school was running it, because there was a board with that and had the people from Huruma and the people from the school, and the director dismantled the board. And so I knew I had to deal with the people who live in the slum who were not too happy about what was happening with the school, and I also had to balance the people who've been running the school since I came to Middlebury, Mama Irene and her team, that I discovered too had become more of like her family members. Like the principal was her niece, the computer teacher was her nephew. So I was dealing with so many things at the time, which of course, at Middlebury, I didn't think I was going to be dealing with that. I thought that we're going to be working on a library. And also, I also had to deal with my team members, because they'd never been to Kenya before. And they're great people, but of course, when you're in a place as a group of 12 people, it's in a new country, at times it might be hard to live together. So only because we're athletes that we were able to be resilient and be like, hey, we're going to swing back. And also, it's still not game over for the people at Huruma. We did come up with a game plan with the community members. We actually have it on tape, because Marty recorded it. We have a few other projects in mind that I'll probably pursue when I'm in graduate school, that they think will be better for them, because some of them miss the opportunity to be in high school. Some of them need other skills. And so it was all listening, just like you listen to your coach. You have to listen to the people there, because I love this community. I feel like I'm part of the community. And so it's the game continues, and I guess this is halftime when I'm here, and I'll be going back for the second half in a few years. So it's definitely a game.
Wow. And Kelly, you have a challenge coming up, I guess a lifestyle challenge. You're about to become a nurse practitioner, and is there something you want to ramp up with the foundation, and how are you going to pull that off with diminished time, and what's next?
Yeah, that's true. It's going to be it'll be an interesting change for me personally, because I'll be graduating from grad school and doing all that. But for the foundation, we're sort of in an interesting place at this point, because we've been doing the same thing for a few years, and we've been getting pretty good at it, and we have this bike ride that we're raising a bunch of money, and we're giving away a bunch of grants, and with ski racing safety, we've sort of been doing the same thing over and over, but we want to take the ski racing safety thing to the next step. And how can we really change the sport, rather than just sort of giving away protective equipment, which is what we've been doing? How can we take it so that we're changing the sport sort of forever, and making something more permanent? So we've been sort of struggling with that the last couple of years, how to go about this, and we've just sort of started figuring out this plan, and we are taking on this whole new platform where we're working with a couple different big organizations to really make something happen. So we're working with the U.S. Ski Team, which is obviously a big organization, and the National Ski Areas Association, which takes all the ski areas in the country, and we're going to work with our foundation, and the three of us are going to sort of come up with a plan on how to build a venue. So you're not just putting up fencing to protect the courses, but you're making a whole venue to make it ski racing and make it safer and make it interesting and make people want to do it. So it's an interesting place that we're at with the foundation, because things are sort of changing, and how can we still have the same goals, but how can we make everything bigger at this point? And stay tuned, because who knows how it'll turn out.
Well, you've got your teammates, just as you had a team behind you as you did your rehab, and you've inspired a lot of people with a ride and your example. You know, that sort of what's next is such a big question in this movement. And one of the challenges, I think, for every organization is the one, how do you, they call it M&E in the field, monitoring and evaluation. How do you assess and then go back to your donors and say, look, with your money we did this, and we can document it. And I'd love to hear Dave and Al maybe address that a little bit, just how in your own organizations you do that assessment, and how critical it is, and whether when you go asking for money, are you finding situations where donors, you know, show me the proof that you're really making a difference? Dave, you want to start?
Yeah, I think assessment is a really important thing, and it's actually one of the reasons why I think GivingSomeThing is also filling a need. There have been examples in the past between Haiti or Japan after the tsunami, where there was abuse and there was misrepresentation, and at times people do become skeptical of how their money is being put to use, and how organizations are making an impact. And so in that way, you know, GivingSomeThing's helping for some people that do want to have an attachment to their impact and kind of know how they're directing it. All the meanwhile, there are lots of very powerful, very successful organizations that do show progress and show impact and track in a really nice way. Lacrosse Nations has interesting challenges in that by working in the schools in Nicaragua or Costa Rica, but we're tying a lot of our measurements to attendance records, because when you're dealing with a school in the middle of a trash dump where, you know, kids will sometimes they're not allowed to go to school by their parents because they're going to go work. So if we can get them to school, they're not working out in the trash dump. They're learning basic, you know, vocabulary, basic math, and so we're tracking attendance. And if they attend school, then they can go to the lacrosse program. You know, and I think it also depends on your community. So, you know, with our program in Columbus, Ohio, you can tie it more to grades and to, you know, more finite success, whereas, you know, they're not necessarily tracking, you know, grades the same way we do with GPAs and everything in the middle of Managua. So yeah, I think that really is important. I think organizations often get started out of, you know, kind of a leap of faith of core supporters who really believe in the organization's founders and the overall mission, and that gets it off the ground, gets it running. And then to really have a long-lasting impact, you need to prove a track record, and that's how organizations last for generations.
Yeah, and in sport, we all love sport, and we love to play it, we love to be involved with it as long as we can, and I think that sometimes obscures the need to look at. And there's some programs like grassroots soccer actually has the ability to look at infection rates, and really hard numbers can help make that case. But in some cases, I think in the case of City Squash, you need to do it in a slightly more subjective way, right, with questionnaires and surveys. Is that?
Yeah, I would say that assessment is one of our biggest challenges, trying to figure out how we can assess our students, because we do have, you know, several foundations that are very generous and give us large grants each year. But they've started to say, you know, we want to know where our money is going, and we want to see what our money is doing to help these students. And so because of these, you know, demands, which are completely reasonable from people that give us money, we do have to think about the best way to assess our students. And it's tough for us as staff members because so much of what we teach we feel is intangible. And working with our students every day and over the course of the year, we can see the growth. But for someone who's, you know, maybe coming to visit our program one day out of the year, or, you know, we're just giving them kind of a PowerPoint presentation on our program, how can we show those results? And so we've struggled a lot with, you know, trying to find ways to assess our students without making it really difficult for the students and making it kind of a not fun part of City Squash, because we do have a limited time with the students, and so we don't want to have to take time away from our programming to be administering, you know, a test to the students a couple times a year. That was something that we talked about doing and ultimately decided not to. So, you know, right now we do have access to the students' grades, and so we can track how they do in school. We track their attendance with us in City Squash. We can show donors how they do in the squash tournaments that they play in, that we sign them up for and bring them to. But I think that it's something that is an ongoing challenge for us, and one way that we've tried to address that this year is that we've tried to implement surveys into our programming. So we have a parent survey, we have a student survey. Eventually, if we find that these are effective, we might also have our partner schools fill out a survey, which would track how they've seen changes in our students in their classroom. And it's also something that, you know, individual staff members can use, because as director of placement, I realized that one of the summer programs that we were using last summer was not really effective for our students, but we still want to find a summer program for them to go to. So I'm thinking about just making a survey for those students that were at that program over the past several years and asking what was good about it, what was bad about it, and what would their ideal program be, to see if I can then find a program that would more closely fit the needs of what we're looking for.
Well, in a moment, we do want to throw it open to your questions, but I wanted to give the panelists a chance to throw a question at anyone else on the panel, if anything has occurred to you, if there is.
Yeah, I have one for Kelly. I think one, as you talk about these partnerships and kind of taking on some very large projects, you know, at times it really tests patience in terms of, you know, you want to see things happening yesterday, not, you know, and really want the timeline to be as fast as possible. Can you speak a little bit to patience and how that has a factor in your organization's growth?
Yeah, definitely. I think there's a lot to be said for patience and a lot to be said for things move a lot slower than you want them to a lot of the time. For us, we have me, who I'm in grad school now. You know, I'm really busy. I live in Boston. I'm not around all the time. My family, who lives up here, but they all have jobs of their own. And we have 2 people, basically, who work part-time for the foundation and who are amazing, and I don't know what we would do without them, but you ask them to do something, and they do it really quickly, but yeah, I've sent that email, but I haven't heard anything back from, you know, the president of the National Skiers Association. Well, okay, the Kelly Brush Foundation isn't necessarily their biggest priority at the time, so it's definitely, you know, a give and take where you have to sort of accept that it's going to take a little while, but at the same time know that whatever we're doing, it's worth it and it'll get done. So it has certainly a lot to do with persistence at the same time of being patient and not sort of overbearing. I don't know if that answers your question.
Any other questions from up here? And it's this is sort of late night at McCullough here, and there was a reason we started it late. We wanted people to be able to get up from Boston and New York. People are coming up for the homecoming weekend, but please, we'd love to hear your questions for any of the panelists. Here is your chance. Yes.
There's something about sport as a medium of development and charity that is effective because it's sport and it's objective and it's you know, it's egalitarian, or is there something about you guys using sport just because you were athletes that means it's the best sort of channel for you?
I think that there is something about it that's egalitarian, because so for when our students go to play in tournaments, I mean, squash in the United States is a northeastern, very elite sport. And when our kids go to these, you know, U.S. squash tournaments, they are oftentimes the only students of color there. they're the only students coming from these very poor socioeconomic backgrounds. But when they step on the squash court, that doesn't matter. All that matters is, you know, who has the better game on that given day. And what we see is that our students really learn to interact with all different kids coming from all different backgrounds at these tournaments. I was just speaking with one of the mentors in our program the other day about a student that we have applying to boarding school next year. And he was saying how he's so excited for him in this process because he doesn't worry about him going to that school and fitting in socially, because he watches him at these squash tournaments just getting along with everyone, really working the crowd. And so we found that squash can be a great equalizer for our students. And, you know, when they go off to these boarding schools, if they're playing at the top of their ladder, people at the school automatically respect them for their squash playing abilities. And it doesn't matter that, you know, when they go home on a break, they're going home to a completely different environment than the majority of the students at that school are coming from.
Yeah, it's striking how all four of the sports represented here are, in one way or another, have the reputation as being kind of elite or exclusive. So it's really impressive, the effort that's being made here to bring it to everybody. Really striking. I mean, rugby, tell me if I'm wrong. I mean, there are some parts of the world it's not elite or exclusive, but its beginnings were certainly elite and exclusive, right, Mugo? Am I?
Oh yeah, I definitely agree. And when I was a teacher at Newton, I was also in charge of the athletics, and I did double with trying to start a rugby team with the students at Newton, because rugby in Kenya it's an elite sport, and it was started by the British, and it was an all-white sport like it was in South Africa. And the schools, the top schools in Kenya, how to check whether a school is top is to ask whether they have a rugby program. They'll be like, so do you guys play in the Prescott Cup? And so at the time, me and Alu thought for these students to be able to feel at the same level as the students who go to maybe St. Mary's or Strathmore, they have to, they need to dream and they need to believe. And so we started a rugby program, and because rugby is it's a class sport, and if they can play rugby, they definitely will think they can do just as well as the people who live in Runda who go to these other schools. But the problem was that you couldn't incorporate women, since the women wouldn't be allowed to play rugby at the time. So we had that stumbling block, and so we had to like pull it back a bit, and we're trying to think of another sport that could incorporate everyone. And so we doubled with both volleyball and soccer. But so a sport there's so many complexities you have to look at when you're looking at a sport to help people dream. Of course, sport will definitely help people dream, but in different societies, the sports can have different implications. And we definitely saw a big change with the people who are playing rugby. They were more confident. They were trying new things and things like those. And then later on, we're faced with this whole problem of gender, and the idea that women are also meant to play sport. So we were faced with like a pull, push, like being pulled back, and so that was a very complicated aspect of it.
Other questions?
Yeah, sort of, our basic things that we give away all the time are, I mean, basic, is all relative, but the things that are really common that we give away are mono skis, hand cycles, different types of wheelchairs for tennis and basketball and those things. But I mean, it's cool no matter what we give away and who we give it to. But some of the ones that we've given away, as Steve touched on, are really random that you would never think of. Like one of the first grants we gave was to a kid in California for adaptive scuba equipment. He wanted, scuba diving is what he loved to do, and he couldn't do it the same way. He wasn't able to swim as well. So we gave him this stuff so that it could be a lot easier for him. And he was able to do that. And just last year or the year before, we gave away a bowling chair for this lady who was living in Vermont somewhere here, and she was, she hadn't done anything for a number of years after she got hurt. I want to say 10 or 15 years. And she applied to us and was saying, I want to do something with my life. I want to be able to get out of the house. And what I used to love to do and what a bunch of my friends do is they go bowling. So can I have a bowling chair? And I was like, I didn't even know that existed. I didn't know there was such a thing. But sure, that sounds great. If that gets you out of the house and gets you interacting with people again, not just holed up in your house, that is great for us. So it really is, the adaptive equipment is interesting because on the one hand, we have these athletes who are, elite athletes who say, I have a hand cycle, but I need this really, really great one in order to be competitive. So can you provide that, this competitive bike for me so that I can maybe make it to the Olympics? And that's great on one hand, and then on the other hand, we have these people who say, I've been injured for 15 years and I never leave my house, and I'm thinking about doing sports now, and I think that might help me, and can you help me get started with that? And both ends of the spectrum are really important, I think, to us, and important in each of those people's lives in very different ways, but sort of similar at the same time. So it's really cool to see both of those types of people applying to us and be able to help everybody.
Yes?
This might be more for Dave, but any of the panelists that you or they might say, you've all been very successful, and it's impressive, it's frankly inspiring to hear what you've done. I think whenever you're on a journey like that, though, you have a time where you hit some dark, rough patches or a dark moment where you think, it's not going to happen. For Dave, giving something is, you might have come across that. Thinking about our audience here, and maybe there's people that are going to want to do something like the things that you've all done. What dark spots did you hit, and how did you get through it? And what advice would you give to someone in that situation?
It's definitely true. I mean, there are times in almost anything you're involved in that you hit walls or you hit road bumps, and some you can get through pretty easily, and some you have to solidify support and kind of look inward and see how you can move forward. For GivingSomeThing, one of the challenges is it's a startup. You often hear entrepreneurial success stories, and when the person takes the stage to talk about the startup that they nailed it, the startup part is kind of glossed over. They gotta get to some of the other lessons, and the startup phase takes a lot of patience, it takes a lot of focus, and kind of a core confidence in what you're trying to start and what you're trying to enact. So with GivingSomeThing, we've had confirmation along the way from people we've talked with, people we shared the idea with, a growing number of organizations that are finding value in it. And you have to trust it. And as far as Lacrosse Nations goes, in a different way, the dark spot for me, I think, is just, you kind of want, in the end, like our program in La Treca, you want it to become obsolete. I want La Treca to not exist, and I don't want us to be there. And so there's, in a strange way, I've been going down there for since my senior year, and it was incredible. It's life-changing, and I know it's life-changing for the kids that we're working with. And there is a community there, and there are people that we know and that recognize us. But in a way, you also don't want to be recognized. You want to be like I want this place to not be here. And I think that's one struggle with Lacrosse Nations, where when you
when you really are dealing with some really difficult issues, in the end, you really just want them to be resolved. So you have to have faith in incremental change, and that you're going in the right direction, and that you are making impact, and with time there'll be significant impact.
Maybe one last question I could throw to you, Mugo, because we saw the Mandela quote at the very beginning of the evening, and there was that passing photo of Mandela with Francois Pienaar at the '95 World Cup, the famous Invictus. Those of us who've seen the movie, were you aware of all that as it was going on there? You're a black African. You must have been formative age when that happened in '95. What was your reaction when this game, this rugby, and all of Mandela's leading black South Africans to become rugby fans? What did that mean?
I was actually in first grade actually at the time, so I did watch the game though, and there was a big. It was South Africa, and it was interesting because the Boks though, no one ever cheered for the Boks. Like if the Boks were playing any other team, everyone would support the other team, and that's why I feel the All Blacks became popular in Kenya. And it's only recently, like I'd say in the late 90s, that South Africa has become an African team. And it was mainly because of apartheid and the fact that Nelson Mandela, he and the white South Africans kept the sport and they understood the power of the sport, and by locking people out, it was used in a selfish way, which led to the whole idea of the Bok being hated by everyone, and all Africans didn't like it. But Nelson Mandela did a big twist on everyone by supporting and by agreeing for them to keep the name, which was a name that represented apartheid, and no one thought he was in his sane mind at the time when the South African rugby team kept its name and continued being called that. But I guess he understood that sport is bigger than any of these things, or sports can be used to heal such a big racial scar that was created by apartheid. And today, no one even thinks of the Bok as a symbol of apartheid, and it was. And so it took Nelson Mandela, who was a brilliant man, to realize how sport could be used to heal a whole country. And for the first time, people started rooting for the Springboks. And in case you've watched Invictus, and I also do have a few white South African friends, they were like that. They actually told me about that example. They were like, their nannies for the first time were actually rooting for their home team, because back in the day they always rooted for the opposite team, and no one ever rooted for the home team because they knew what it stood for. So it's very I feel happy being able to play the sport today, and because Nelson Mandela allowed the sport to be played by all races, and he understood that what the idea of sport and the idea of humanity, which is why I'm actually here today, I feel.
If that isn't a note to end on, I don't know what is. A first grader watching the Rugby World Cup, and it determined the influence of the course of your life. It's pretty extraordinary. I just personally want to thank the incredible people at the Center for Social Entrepreneurship, Heather and Liz and Jaya and Lauren that I work with in prepping this. Aaron Quinn, thank you so much. And thanks to our panelists. Some of you made extraordinary efforts, Kelly, particularly who got an offender bender on 89 on her way up here. But so good to